think about client first. It's really, really important that you're taking the right kind of clients on for the right reasons. And that right reason has to be because paid traffic for that client is an opportunity you to the best of your ability going into that agreement, believe you can make profitable for them. And so for me, it's all about what are they doing today? Will this add to them? Is it that they're just doing it badly? A great place to start, and where we cut our teeth, wasn't starting brand new campaigns for people who'd never advertised before. It was taking a look at what people were already either doing themselves or that they got somebody else doing for them. We'd audit the account and figure out how much money they were wasting. And that's a really easy, safe play, because you can check how big your opportunity to make an impact is before you ever say yes and take the client on. So my suggestion would be start there. Existing advertisers, for a brand new agency, never run just a PPC campaign. It's a good place to start.
Welcome to Show Me the Nuggets, where each week Joe chats with world-class entrepreneurs to find out the key principles, strategies, and processes that lie behind their outstanding achievements. Now, your host, the no bullshit serial entrepreneur, Joe Troyer.
Hey everybody, it's Joe Troyer, and welcome to another episode of Show Me the Nugget. So today, guys, I'm super excited to bring you guys kind of behind the scenes on a conversation that, quite frankly, should have happened a long time ago with each and every one of you guys. Today, I have on my good friend and now business partner, Rob Warner from Invisible PPC. So welcome, Rob, to the show.
Hey, Joe, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah. So for those of you guys that don't know Rob, Rob owns, founded, and started Invisible PPC, which is definitely one of the biggest, 100% white label PPC providers out there. And I'm super excited that I got to join the team this year and be part of this crew. And so together, right now we're managing about $2.5 million in ad spend. For partners quite literally all across the globe. I mean, there's every time I look and we're onboarding a deal, I'm like, where's this person from? Like, it's just crazy to see all the deals from like the referral partners, but then the client facing businesses as well.
Yeah, so I can't think of a country where we don't have people. If they speak English, and sometimes even if they don't, we've probably got a client there.
So it's super awesome, again, to have you on the show, and I'm excited to kind of bring everybody up to speed. If they don't know Invisible PPC, right, now's the time that they're going to get introduced and they're going to get to know you firsthand in the company. So I know that Invisible PPC was kind of born by accident, so to speak, and out of necessity, I guess you could say as well, back in 2013, I believe. Can you share that story with everybody?
Yeah, so we got started actually ever so slightly earlier than that, sort of 2012 really, but going into 2013 was where it all started to happen. And I never meant to set up a PPC agency. I never meant to set up an agency at all. I was running a SaaS company at the time, and in the UK at the time, the UK economy was in a pretty bad state with austerity and post-financial crash. And the bottom, my business was dying at that time. Thankfully, it survived, but at the time it was dying. And I needed to pay some bills, and I had less than zero money. I had just about maxed out every card I owned, and things were really, really serious. And we'd run some PPC for the business that we owned at the time to try and just do any kind of business. No real clue what we were doing. I mean, there was moderate levels of skills involved from having read the book. Just any book, to be quite honest, to learn a bit. But much to our surprise, it worked, and we got a few customers. It was like, oh, great. And then I got talking to people, and people said, oh, could you do that for me then? I've seen you've done that for yourself. Could you do it for us? And I'm like, but if you're paying, I'll do anything you'll pay me to do pretty much at that stage. And it was better than dancing on a table. So we took on our first couple of clients for PPC, and it was literally sheer desperation, but it then started to take off, and then things got interested in it during 2013.
That's awesome. So for people that are maybe new to the agency world, maybe new to the freelancer world, can you talk a little bit about what white label means? It seems like people don't fundamentally understand it sometimes, and even people that I believe would understand it just fundamentally sometimes think something different. So What does white label PPC mean to you?
So to me, and you're right, when we started this, I didn't even know that's what I'd started. I'll just preface that. My fourth or third client happened to be a guy who worked in an agency. It was a sales guy for an agency, and he approached me and said, look, Rob, we've got a ton of clients for SEO and website builds. A bunch of them are spending money on PPC, but are not spending it with us as an agency. You've clearly got some skills here. Why don't we get together? I'll do the selling and you do the fulfillment. And so I would drive down to their office in London, or get a train down, go sit with him alongside him and a client, and we'd pitch jointly. He'd do anything, sales, closing. I was very anti-sales. I came from a finance background, so sales scared the Jesus out of me. I couldn't handle selling. So having a wingman there selling for me was just like perfect for me. And we started doing that. And so essentially, we accidentally started a white label agency. Now, if you take a step back from that and say, okay, what's the difference between a white label agency and being a freelancer working for an agency? And I think it comes down to this. A white label agency typically has infrastructure, it has scalability, it has resilience to it. It's really easy as an agency owner to think, I'm going to go out and hire a freelancer to fulfill this client for me. And for one client, that can work great. For two clients, it can work great. But as you grow that, your only way to grow is to add more freelancers. And when you add more freelancers, you'll find that they work in different ways. They have their own processes. They're different. They have different communication styles, different availabilities. And so you as an agency owner suddenly are managing a bunch of people who all do things differently, all have their own systems, and it gets really complicated really quickly. And then, of course, one goes AWOL. You know, it always happens in the freelancer world. At some point, somebody goes off grid unexpectedly, and you're left going, oh crap, now what do I do to get out of this? So as an agency that's white label, the difference for me is resilience and scalability. And that's what we bring over and above. The technical skills are a given, but it means that we are able to invest in tools, processes, and resilience that a freelancer could never bring. So that's where the difference is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So tools, resilience, kind of backups, standard operating procedures.
Yep.
Yep. So
if an agency brings a client, an agency knows that the way client number 1 gets treated will be exactly the same as client number 10, will be exactly the same as client number 15 and 20, and so on. They don't need to think about their process. They just need to follow the process. And it's that kind of simple. So it makes it a much, much easier process to manage as an agency owner, because you don't have to rethink it every time. You don't think which skill set's best per that. We figure out if there's different things required, where it's best to get it done. You just don't worry about it.
So I'm curious, what type of agencies do you think are a good fit for white label PPC versus agencies that maybe aren't such a good fit?
Oh, awesome question. After lots of bitter experience and lots of awesome experience, I can give you a really good definition of that. There are a couple of things that make a difference. Most of our agencies are small. They are 1 to 10 people operations. Not exclusively, but on the whole, that's where most of them are. The key thing is, if you're an agency owner who likes to micromanage, if you may have controlling tendencies, you'll get very frustrated working with a white label agency, because we're not sat across the desk. We're not available at a moment's notice to answer every question that crosses your mind. And we're going to do it the way we see best, which might not be the way that you think best. So agencies who tend to, agency owners rather, personality type who like, micro control over everything, can struggle sometimes. We work with, I think of people in our portfolio of agencies right now who fit that criteria, and we've managed over time to build a healthy long-term relationship. But at the start, it was quite bumpy. The ones where I feel it doesn't work so well is if you are used to having an in-house specialist dedicated to you, sat across a day table, who can react at a moment's notice to anything, then working with a white label service provider can get frustrating very quickly, because you're used to only having one person setting their priorities, and that's you.
Yep.
And you set the workload. You can set, you can say you've got to stay late tonight and finish this. You can make the rules up. Are as accommodating and flexible as we possibly can be, but that doesn't mean we can accommodate every moment of that. So we tend to find if the people are putting stuff out for the first time that they've previously done internally, that can get difficult for them. And we tell people that up front, say you're going to have a different experience. Some people understand that trade-off, that the scale and expertise that we bring is different to the flexibility of having the person sat across the table. And if you're adaptable, it works. If you're not adaptable, it doesn't.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious then, do you think that there are agency sizes that work best with Invisible PPC, right? You kind of led into that a little bit, but I think you didn't hit that real deep. Like, is it only starter agencies that are really working with Invisible, or big agencies too? Or what kind of agencies do you think work best, Rob, with Invisible?
I would say work best is small to medium. So I say that 1 to 10 person agency, because there comes a point where the fees they're paying us starts to look like one or more salaries.
Yeah.
Now, some business owners, once they reach that point, get into a perception that, hang on a minute, I'm paying you to do these clients. I could have somebody to do all my clients for that cost. And they go through that thought process. What they don't think about in that process is, but then I've got to cover holidays, sickness, absence. I've got to provide all their tools, all their training. I've got to hire one. I've got to hope the one that I hire is good and that they stay, or don't have to rehire. So they can sometimes get wrapped up in that thought process around what does it look like for a good person. A good person now in the US, depending which city you're recruiting it in, can cost you anywhere up to 100,000 easily, and more. So you're not making a small investment here. And so we tend to find most fall into that. Once we see bigger agencies, they tend to want to have process control. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to process control, because they want to scale with their own processes, their own systems, and then fitting into ours becomes more difficult for them. So we tend to find a natural disconnect at that point.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, just last weekend, I was having a chat with somebody about this very scenario. And the gentleman, for anonymity's sake, we won't say his name, but he's got like roughly 200 clients, right? And so I'm having dinner with him, and he's like, man, I really, really wish that I would have known about you guys and Invisible PPC years ago, right? Like, because I would have just used you guys and it would save me a lot of heartache. And then I'm like, yeah, that would have been great, right? Like, we would have been able to build a relationship over the last couple of years. And then all of a sudden he turns and he looks at me and he says, well, why does that have to change? Like, can't you just do all my PPC now? And I'm like, wait a second, like, you're talking about a couple hundred clients. And so I had to kind of unpack that conversation with him like we just did. And it's interesting because it was basically the same exact conversation, right? So process control, and then, the cost of labor, yes, you'd probably win in terms of costs versus working with us, at least in the short term. But then when you figure tools and you figure, like you said, vacations and holidays, and you figure, training the person and managing the person, versus having a whole team. So yeah, that's very interesting.
And there is a caveat there that as well I would add to that, Joe, which is that there are certain clients in our book of business where we have dedicated people specifically for them. So we have dedicated teams. And what that typically means is a person who is full-time working with that client, supported by a team, some of whom may be full-time, some of whom aren't necessarily, but it means it's then like having an employee. So at that point, it's kind of like an Iron Man style super employee, because it's a person that is your person within the business, full-time, with no other distractions than your business, accountable to you. They can then be the person who you can call 10 times a day. You can treat them like an employee, and their job essentially is to then manage the resource here to make sure that that's provided properly. So some of it they'll be doing themselves, other things they'll be calling on other team members. So you get the benefit of the scale and the experience, but packaged in the convenience of a single, noted point of contact like an employee would be. And we found that for larger agencies, that's the best way to handle that.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of like the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it's kind of like a hybrid. And we like it a lot because we've got agencies who reach that size and reach the point of saying, hey, Rob, what do we do now? We're at this stage now, we've got 25, 30 clients with you. What should we do next? And we've kind of transitioned into those models with them, and it's been super successful, where otherwise we would most likely have gone separate ways. We find with bigger agencies, slowly works best. Your friend with 200, if he said, can we do this tomorrow? We'd say do 5. Let's do 5 this week. Let's get comfortable with process and relationship. Then we'll do another 5. We have had people throw large volumes of clients at us at once. And while we've coped with it, they've struggled to cope with the transition. And so that's been an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, 100%. So Rob, I'm going to ask you a very pointed question. Why have you decided to work behind the curtains, right, and be white label versus working directly with clients? I understand that it was kind of on accident to start, right? But at some point, fundamentally, you made a decision.
It's really easy to say it was purely accidental. We ended up here because I don't like making sales. I've been anti-sales for a long time just from my background, and that wasn't my comfort zone. So in the early days, it was very convenient and nothing more than that. And it allowed me to hide behind some of my own personal shortcomings and skill set weaknesses. As we then grew that business, we reached a point where we said, actually, we're a decent sized business now. We're serving lots of clients all over the world. And if you take a step back, could I, as an agency, realistically set up operations and service clients in multiple geographies, many different time zones, and actually make the impact we want to make? And the answer is yes, but it'd be really difficult and time consuming and slow. With the white label model and focusing on that being our sole goal, our sole outcome, and saying, how do we best service agencies so that we can win together and grow together? That's allowed us to build our service to such a point where we believe we can have a much bigger impact by being behind the scenes, empowering small agencies with a level of skill and resource they could never buy for themselves in-house. We're giving them that firepower in their organization, and they can win from that. And that for us now says, my belief is we can have a much bigger impact this way than we ever could have, trying to set up small agencies in multiple different places.
Love that. Yeah, that's great. So Rob, can you share with us what it means to be a Google channel partner agency? Because I don't believe anybody knows what that really means.
Yeah, so let's just break it down a little bit, because you're right, nobody knows what the heck it is. Google helpfully have badges that they award to Google partner agencies. They have a blue badge for relatively new small agencies, which you call just basic partner badge. They have a red badge for premier partner agencies, and there's an algorithm that determines who gets that. In numbers, roughly 40,000 partners worldwide, of which about 5%, about 2,000 are premier partners. That's the latest numbers I've got from Google about 12 months ago. Within that, there are about 400 agencies worldwide who are classed as channel sales partners, of which we're one. And there's no badge for it. So there's nothing to go, ta-da, it's this. We don't even get a sign or an award. But the way it works is, at some point when you're in the premier partner community, something on a dashboard somewhere in Mountain View triggers an alert to say to one of their team, hey, we've got a fast growing agency business here. We need to see if we can support them and nurture them. And Google kind of hedges their bets. If you're a brand new agency with no badge, you get no support. If you've got a blue badge, you kind of get marginally more support than none, but it's barely noticeable the difference. When you reach channel sales, we have weekly calls with our reps. We have access to funding sometimes. We have access to marketing resources. We have access to beta programs before anybody knows they're even there. So we get to see a lot behind the curtains. We get to go to effectively closed door events. I got invited to one about a year ago called it was the Channel Partner Council, which was even a subset of those channel sales partners of about 50 agencies worldwide, where we actually get involved with, at the highest level of the organization, what's the partner group and community going to look like going forward. So we get some really interesting things. We got there, it took us by surprise about 2 years ago when we got the invite to join this group. So much so that we were asked to speak to the worldwide head of Google partners at that time. No, sorry, Google Ads. a guy called Alan Tegerson asked us to speak to him on the phone, which was a big deal. I mean, these guys don't make time. If you look at on the Google org chart as it was, he's underneath the two founders. It's in my mind for two reasons. One was about 10 days before the call, we got a call from our partner rep. And he went, Rob, we've got a bit of a problem for the meeting with Alan. It's like, he likes to check out who he's talking to, and he can't check you out. Could you please build a website? We just got 4 years into this journey without a website. So if anybody's worried about things stopping them or holding them back, we built an agency selling agency services without a website. And we did quite all right to that point. We then finally got on the call. Sometimes, as you know me well enough, Joe, to know that I tend to be disarmingly honest at times. And we started this call with Alan. It was, if you imagine, a big Google conference room with people sat every level of management. We're kind of getting, the further away they got, the less senior they got from Alan around this table. And Alan said to us, his opening question was, so Rob, why did you set up Invisible PPC? And I said, we set Invisible PPC up on 3 core foundations: cowardice, desperation, and a lack of better alternatives. Thankfully, he laughed because the rest of the room looked like they were about to have a heart attack. But it kind of reflected where we'd come to at that point. And if you were to say what was the pivot point, that call, the day when you realize you're talking to the most senior person in the Google Ads organization there is, it was the point where you kind of go, time to grow up. Time to be extremely intentional about what we do, because we've got something here that's valuable and people see right at the highest levels, we've got an organization to invest in. So that was the pivot for us.
That's such an awesome story. I love the 3 keys, the 3 foundations. Every time you tell that story, I laugh so hard. It never gets old.
I must stop telling it then if I've told it more than once.
Next, I want to kind of move into some stuff for all the listeners in terms of like the foundation really I want to set for a PPC agency. I want to talk about some of the more foundation type of things, and then we can move into kind of prospecting for clients, converting clients, but let's talk about the foundation for a second.
Yeah.
So I want you to go back to when you first started Invisible PPC and help all of the listeners understand really what it takes to start a new PPC agency, right? Or how marketing agencies could add PPC into their existing portfolio, right?
Yeah. So I think the first thing you need is the technical skills to do the job. And the technical skills are important. You need to do the study, but fundamentally, you kind of need to get your hands dirty doing it. There are lots of things that you can't kind of learn from a book. We're dealing with ever increasingly complex algorithms. And you kind of need to know how they behave, what you can influence and what you can't influence. So the first thing is, whether it's in-house or external, have the right skills and the right tools in place. I think the second thing, once you've got that, think about client first. It's really, really important that you're taking the right kind of clients on for the right reasons. And that right reason has to be because paid traffic for that client is an opportunity you to the best of your ability going into that agreement, believe you can make profitable for them. And so for me, it's all about, what are they doing today? Will this add to them? Is it that they're just doing it badly? A great place to start, and where we cut our teeth, wasn't starting brand new campaigns for people who'd never advertised before. It was taking a look at what people were already either doing themselves or that they got somebody else doing for them. We'd audit the account and figure out how much money they were wasting. And that's a really easy, safe play, because you can check how big your opportunity to make an impact is before you ever say yes and take the client on. So my suggestion would be, start there. Existing advertisers, for a brand new agency, never run just a PPC campaign. It's a good place to start. There are other things we'll talk about in a while and other approaches that are very applicable today. But if you're pure PPC play, that's the place to start.
In your mind, as an agency owner, let's say, why should somebody consider selling PPC? Let's be clear just here. Why pay-per-click advertising with Google, right, or with search specifically? just so that we're on the same page with everybody.
So search specifically has one characteristic that you don't find elsewhere in other online mediums, which is it's intent driven. It's entirely intent driven. People are going into Google and they're typing words into a box because they have a problem they need to solve. That problem might be, hey, I've just seen an actor on TV. Is he dead? It could be those kind of things that we all do from time to time. Or it could be, there's water leaking in my bathroom. How do I stop it? Or I need to get a new kitchen. They're very, very intentional. You don't do that. Nobody ever says I typed it into the search box by accident. You do that thing very deliberately and you do it very intentionally. So that's not to say you're at the end of your journey of making a decision. You might be right at the start, but it starts somewhere, and it starts with a Google search, and it might go off through various other avenues. But if you're asking somebody what's the highest intent form of online marketing, that's it. Search is where intent lives. Facebook is where interruption lives, like Instagram and other places, and Google Display for that matter. That's interruption, and it's fine, but they're a different prospect at a different stage in their motivation, their journey. So that's why I like search, because if someone talks about the prospect quality, so, I've got leads, it's a conversation you always have, I've got leads, but are they good quality leads? Anybody who's gone into Google, typed a thing for the thing that you sell, then visited your website, then chose to either fill out a form, book a consult, call you, or answer a chatbot, that's pretty intentional. That doesn't mean they're qualified. They might not have the money. They might not be ready yet, but it's very intentional. And you can take somebody with that degree of intent down a buyer's path. So it gets the right people into the business at the right time. And that's why I like it above all other things, because it's control. And I'm a numbers guy. It's measurable. It's controllable. That's why we never did SEO, because it scared the heck out of me. I had no measurement or control in there. And I don't like that.
Yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense. I always say it's like the faucet, right? You turn it off, you turn it on, right? And there's nothing that's going to get you, I believe, a faster return or faster clients in the door than search and pay-per-click. So
I had a conversation this morning with a client. When we first started working with them, they were doing less than 100 online leads a month. Last month, we did 2,150 for them. You can imagine the business impact of that. The conversation we had today was, hey, it's summer. This is peak season. We are not at capacity in terms of search budget. How many more could you cope with before it breaks in the business? What a great conversation to have. How wide would you like to turn the faucet?
Yeah,
that was the conversation we had this morning, and we've agreed a number. So there are not many places you can do that with that degree of control.
100%. That's brilliant. All right, cool. So moving on, what are the first things that you think an agency, a brand new agency selling PPC needs to know if they're going to offer PPC so that they can kind of build a strong foundation, right? I would assume personally, like setting expectations would be in there, right? Like future pacing, right? But I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are.
Both of those, and I'll come back to them in a second in more detail. I think fundamentally, there is something that has to happen for every single campaign we run before we'll let it go live. And it's something that can be challenging, can be frustrating, that clients often resist, and hurdles we're putting your way, and that's tracking. As a responsible agency owner, before you start delivering a service, you need to know what the measurement, what good looks like. And the only way you can measure good in digital marketing and PPC terms specifically is with setting tracking up properly. I've seen clients won and lost on the basis of bad numbers. I've seen clients, you can guarantee if you have no tracking, you will be fired because the client doesn't know whether you're doing a good job or not. Sometimes you get fired if you have got tracking because you haven't done a good job, but you've got a much better chance if that's in place. So future pacing, and that's where my future pacing expectation setting would start, is before we do anything to move you forward with your campaign, we're going to build a solid foundation of tracking, because otherwise everything else is guesswork, and I'm assuming you're not paying me to guess. So that's why we always start there. And from there, you're absolutely right. Agencies can be very desperate to make a sale sometimes and promise rainbows and unicorns, and it's the fastest way to go crazy for you and the client. Good quality expectation setting is where your agency growth lives. As far as I'm concerned, retention starts before the sale's even made. If you get that piece right pre-sale and you set good expectations, which is why, coming back to what you said before about for a brand new agency, auditing an existing campaign is the perfect place to start, because it's so easy to set an expectation if you know what's already in play, you know what real numbers are. That's why I would start there, definitely.
So when you think about setting expectations, like what kind of an expectation would you set at the highest level? I know that's difficult because we're not auditing a client's account, right? Like, and I'm just throwing you like a wiffle ball and it's going like this, right? But in the broadest scheme, what would you say?
Okay, so the first thing is, what do we mean by expectation? And the first expectation I always want to set is, how are we going to work together? How are we going to communicate? A great way to lose a client when you're delivering outstanding results is because your communication plans are off. If you don't tell the client how you are going to communicate with them, they will make up their own version of how they think they're going to do it. And if your reality doesn't match theirs, you're fired regardless of outcome in most cases. Yep. So most agency owners I've ever met don't consciously think about how they're going to plan communications with their client. So the first part of expectation setting is, how does this relationship actually work? What am I responsible for, and what are you responsible for? So I think the second part of that is, this is how we're going to communicate. Let's clarify roles and responsibilities. One of your roles, for example, Mr. Client, is to answer the phone when it rings when we've sent you a lead, is to be interested in the prospect who's calling you and offer to try and sell them something. Things like that, which sound really basic, but we've all seen PPC campaigns where the business owner will complain that it's not turned into money for them, and it's because they don't answer the phone. And then I think thereafter, I always like to signpost, if I can, 6 months out in terms of a broad plan. But 3 months out, I'm looking at what's going to happen in month 1, in month 2, in month 3 at a technical level, and what is the purpose of those steps. So the first purpose is, we're going to get some data of real things. We're going to validate everything's tracking correctly. We're going to get what the real numbers look like, and then we're going to start and make some decisions. We know what our goal is, and in terms of those expectations, having a goal is crucially important. And by that I mean, what does your client, what do they believe they're buying when they buy from you? Do they think they're going to get 100 leads a month? I think it's with 10. What is their expectation? And you will be shocked how many agency owners don't know the answer to that question.
Yep.
We get on boards into our business, and we have a specific field that says, what is the client's goal? And the most dreaded 3 words that we see are more phone calls, 1 more, 1,000 more. What does good look like? So, and we can laugh and joke about it, but that's what loses clients. That's what loses relationships. So, getting that goal understood, setting the pacing for it, and we always work on the first 90 days being, we will hit the goal in 90 days. So whatever goal we've agreed, 90 days our time horizon in Google. And Facebook, it will be much faster because Facebook works differently to Google, but we always work 90 days in Google because their algorithms, their optimizations work on a much slower basis. It freaks Facebook guys out sometimes because they're going, this campaign's running 6 hours and it's not working, so I'm shutting it down. In Google, if it's 6 hours, if it's got a click, you're lucky. So we have to manage those expectations differently. Does that answer the question fully?
Yeah, that really helps. On a previous podcast episode, I was talking with a guy that sells kind of a traditional social media marketing agency, you would say SMMA type of services. So it's Facebook. It's Facebook and them just running a Facebook campaign, like some type of attention getting offer, right? That's going to pull somebody hopefully and get somebody excited. So with him, he was talking about that his expectation that he sets is like the goal for the first 3 months is to for the first 6 months is to break even. But it's to break even on an annual contract or the average customer value, right? Not the front end customer value. So what are your thoughts? I'm curious on kind of that type of perspective. Like, what would you tell people? How would you advise people? Like, I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was really good. And he's like, by month 2 or month 3, like we're always hitting that number. It never takes that long. But he's like, then I know right away, like front and center, if I have the right prospect or not, or whether I should go find somebody else.
Yeah, and that's where we get into a more difficult position. So if you were to say, advantages and disadvantages of being a white label service provider, I know you've not asked that question, but kind of the answer is relevant to the conversation, is that we don't have a direct line of sight with the client more often than not. Sometimes we do, but in most cases, we've not been party to the sale transaction. The agency has, and they've set expectations. So for us, we kind of have to piggyback. So the way we approach it is to educate the agency on our expectations. Is that they do their due diligence in bringing that client on responsibly. And that comes down, because most of our clients are lead generation. Now, what is the target cost per lead for the client? Or do they have even if they can't articulate it in a cost per lead, how often are they like expecting the phone to ring a month? In terms of for it to work for them, and however they define for it to work for them, because it could be for us, it could be a dentist, it could be a roofer, it could be a chiropractor, and a lawyer. They've all got, some have lifetime big upfront customer values, some have small. So for us, it's about what does it need to look like for you for it to be profitable in your business, and we're typically looking at in terms of number of leads, number of qualified phone calls. And we can work backwards to cost metrics from there. Then we know if we hit that number in 90 days, and 90 days is always our goal, like you just mentioned. We had, when I spoke to one of my colleagues yesterday, we hit it in 3 weeks, which is great. But 90 days is the expectation we set. If we get there faster, that's great. But if you set the expectation of 90 days, it's a great client qualifier. Anybody who wants, again, that phrase that we sometimes hear, we're going to trial it with a small budget for a month and see how it works out. Yeah. I can tell you now how it works out when you trial it with a small budget for a month. It doesn't work out. So it's a huge red flag. If we know someone's in for a 3-month ride to hit their goal, we're good.
Yeah, I love that. It never works. Never. Let's try it for a month. A week into it, they're pulling out. And that's, as an agency owner, if that's one of your first clients, it's a really easy rookie mistake to fall into because you want the first sale, and they go, great, I've got a trial. Okay, you're going to get paid for a month if you're lucky, and it can really set you back because you lose momentum, you lose motivation, and actually it wasn't that it's a bad offer to sell; it's you sold the wrong person with the wrong expectations. So fundamentally, if we looked at, like, let's say somebody has an agency right now and they want to upsell some existing clients that are doing pay-per-click, right? They're running Google ads and they want to have Invisible do fulfillment. What would that look like? Like, what would they have to do in terms of setup, or what would they need to have in place? And then how would they onboard somebody?
So for us, if someone's already running ads, it's really simple. Agencies at a basic level need to have something called a manager account with Google, which every agency running PPC will have. If you haven't got one already, just Google it, Google Manager Account. It's essentially a container where client accounts live, and it's how you as an agency owner will access them. We have the same, and we link our manager account to your manager account, and we have visibility over your clients, and we don't set security alerts off every time we try and log into something. It's a simple, clean process. Once we have that in place, we have standard pricing. One thing we believe strongly is that agencies need visibility and transparency on that pricing. Otherwise, how do you know what to quote somebody? Everything can't be custom. So we flatlined all our pricing, made it even, and we adjust it worldwide. And so an agency simply needs to fill out an onboard form and get the process moving. And for us, the first thing we'll do, as you've heard me say before, is we'll check out all the tracking and possibly put it to pieces and put it back together again. And then once that's in place, then we can get to work.
All right, fantastic, good stuff. So then fundamentally, you talked about it a little bit, but maybe you could expand a little bit. What do you think is the difference between a white label and a client-facing business when it comes to, like, the foundation, right? Like how the company is built, the structure, right? The nuts and the bolts, not the prospecting and the converting clients and everything else, but like truly the fundamentals.
So for us, we, as a white label agency, behave slightly differently to an end user agency. So first thing is, we don't worry about client relationships directly. We worry about agency relationships.
Yeah.
For us, the critical thing for us is making sure that our agencies are happy. And to do that, we have to make their clients happy. And our agencies have to know at every point that we are doing everything we can in their best interests. And sometimes that means having difficult conversations. Sometimes that means saying, you shouldn't make this sale and we won't support it because it's a really bad thing for everybody. So that sometimes can be difficult. But in terms of what's different, all our systems are built for repeatability and for scalability. They're not built for one-off custom client needs. And that's where a lot of agencies go. A lot of agencies, if you're client facing, you'll put together custom packages for your client, of which PPC might be part of it. You might be putting strategies together that combine SEO and Facebook and other things. And a typical front-end agency will often be far more brief-driven, if that makes sense. So they'll be looking at lots of aspects of a digital marketing strategy for a client. We don't do custom. Now, and I say mostly because, for example, we have some clients. We have a group of dental practices. Over 100 practices. It's fair to say they get a pretty custom solution for 100 dental practices, but that's not the norm. The norm is ones and twos of things that we see from agencies every day. So we keep those things routine to a process that works. If somebody says, okay, could I have 3 calls a week on a Tuesday, Thursday, and a Sunday afternoon, please? The answer is no. A front-end agency where you're dealing with a small portfolio of clients, you may have that flexibility. You may make those choices. We focus all our time, effort, money, and resource on delivery and communicating that delivery and nothing else, because that's all we have to think about. So it means we take time out every week for training. Most front-end agencies don't have time to do that. It means we spend lots of time sharing learning across the teams so that we find out what's working in place A and we apply it to place B and we share that knowledge. And we can do that because, as I just said, there might be 100 dentists. Now, they all have a broadly similar need and outcome. If you're a smaller agency and you've got a dentist, a roofer, a chiropractor, a lawyer, an e-com store, and your friend's gym, and all these kind of places, you can't possibly have that insight and that sharing. And so you'll be working far more custom ones and twos off. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Okay.
Yeah, I would say that our allocation of resource is probably 70-30 between fulfillment and service delivery and service improvement, and 30% client communication. Most agencies, we only communicate to an agency. If you look at most agencies who are client facing, it's probably 50-50 at best. And in fact, many I know are 60 or 70-30 in favor of communication versus actually doing the work.
Yeah, I was going to say,
relationship to maintain.
Just flip around the number. It'd be 70-30.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Yeah. Most of them are just talking, not doing a whole lot of work on the back end. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the reality of it, because you have clients and they phone you up at midnight and they want answers on things and they want to change. They want to, they see, we often hear about, you're the web guy, which means I'm going to call you every time anything online crosses my mind and I expect you to know the answer.
So let's shift from foundations now and let's talk about really the next piece. Let's talk about prospecting. And I know this is going to be a little different, but I really want you to take the perspective of an agency owner when it comes to prospecting, and let's look at what's working for the agencies that are working with Invisible PPC, right? Like not so much what you're doing at Invisible PPC or we're doing to attract agencies, but rather what's working right now for agencies when you look at who's onboarding clients, right? Like what do you see as the common things that are working in terms of prospecting?
So the first thought there is possibly the most crucial of all of them, is that as an agency owner, are you prospecting? Many agency owners I know are very reactive to prospecting, and it's very much, business comes to them either through referral or through something else. They do very little structured prospecting. So the first thing I would say is, however you choose to do it, make sure you have a consistent prospecting process in place. And process is a key word. Don't make it up on the fly every day. Have a process that you can measure, you can test, and you can improve, and make sure you're consistent and committed to it. Without that, you have no idea whether you're going to have a good month or a bad month. With that, you know whether the metrics are right. So the first thing is make sure you're prospecting. And I know people who have been successful but running LinkedIn prospecting campaigns, running email prospecting campaigns, running Facebook ads or whatever ads. Choose your weapon. Choose the one that you prefer. At the end of the day, it only comes down to the audience you're prospecting to, the message, and the numbers. They're all things you control. They're all things you can measure, test, and improve. So whichever tool you go for or combination of doesn't matter as long as the numbers work out right for you. In terms of messaging is where it gets really interesting right now. We're in a stage where many clients have already had agencies. They've had relationships, good and bad, and they may be in the market, but you're dealing with with prospects who've had those experiences. They're not green buyers necessarily all the time now. Some are. And so you need messaging to cut through that noise. It's no good just to be a general agency going, hey, we do web stuff, hire us for PPC, SEO, whatever. You've got to be really focused. And they can do that in one of two ways. One way we're seeing great success with at the moment is something we call omni-targeting. And omni-targeting as a prospecting method works really well because it's new. It uses language and messaging and techniques that very few businesses have heard of before. So it allows you to cut through the noise. You're not just another one of those. You're not just another PPC guy, another web guy. It's, I haven't seen this. What is it? I'm interested. I need to find out more. The second thing that can work is to say, and my regular PPC approach is, find your best case study, your best client, your best outcome, and go find people who look like that because it's immediately relatable. Hey, I just got this result for client A. They look a lot like you. If that result would be valuable for you, get in touch. Whatever your medium is, it doesn't matter. Those two messages are the things that I'm seeing the biggest success with by far at the moment.
Okay, so just to be clear, that second one then was all about like essentially picking a niche or a vertical or
it's really hard to be general.
Staying in the lane.
You can be generalist if you have the right kind of network in place. One of our good agency partners, for example, has extremely deep relationships in 3 network groups, and those groups are sufficiently large in size where they have the reputation in those groups as being the go-to person. So they get a variety of clients, but they actually get it through some very small closed circles. And that works really well for them because in that group community, they are the person. If you are not that person, you don't have those deep embedded relationships in a community, you need to be very much more specific in your messaging. And it's a far smarter thing to do anyway, because the downside to the first person I've just spoke about is that they've got to reinvent the wheel every time they make a proposal. They've got to learn the market. They've got to learn the language. Everything is brand new to them pretty much every time they take on a client. By the time you've taken on your 10th of something, you know pretty much everything there is to know about that market. When someone says to us, hey, I've got a dental client, do you think it will work selling implants? We go, well, our other 149 are doing pretty much fine. I'm sure 150 will be okay. You can't get that level of depth of knowledge if you're constantly swimming in different lanes, as you said.
One thing I want to highlight that you said is like really the only one, correct me if I'm wrong, really the only people who shouldn't be niching down are people that almost have like a supply chain already of deals coming to them. And the supply chain of those deals is so broad, right, that they'd have to turn around or turn away most of that work. That is the only or situation in which you wouldn't recommend the niche down.
Oh, completely. And I'd still recommend the niche sale as well for them. I've had that conversation with this particular agency owner many times, and they know it themselves because they know that much as those networking groups are their strengths, it's also by far their biggest weakness. All it takes is one negative review from one vocal individual in one of those groups, and it will spread like wildfire. And so they live kind of a little bit in fear that the foundation, their strength they're built upon is also the biggest threat to their business.
And oftentimes, like, the problem is like, it's not apples to apples. It's not the same thing. Like, you take one campaign that works in this niche, right? And then you go apply it to another niche and it's not going to work. Fundamentally, like, they're just different. And so even an agency that was on top of it, doing everything right by the book, right, could quite literally be in a situation where they ruin their reputation overnight.
Yeah, and all it takes is a client who, for example, insists on using their own website rather than a landing page, and it doesn't convert. You could be running the best campaign in the world to a terrible website experience, and it will fail every time. And if that's what you've taken on as an agency owner, you're in trouble because you get the blame. You've run the traffic, it's your fault.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. The local or the end business owner doesn't want to pay for a landing page. Traffic isn't converting, so the campaign lost.
It's exactly the conversation you get into. Yeah, and so again, by same token, we sometimes find this strange conversation. They're going to invest in a landing page once the campaign's working. It's like, all right, just please replay that. Remind me how that works again.
Yeah.
Send traffic to something that doesn't convert until we've proven it works. Okay, good luck with that.
So let's say somebody has chosen a niche, right? They look at their current clients, they figure out that they really like working with this particular niche, they're able to get that niche results. But let's just say, because you said it, they decide to go after dental, but specifically after like implants. Yeah. So that's their ideal customer. They're going to look for businesses that are doing specifically over $1 million, let's say over $2 million a year, and those are kind of the main criteria for them. So they have their niche, their offer. Obviously, they're going to be running PPC since that's what we're talking about. But what would you tell somebody, or what advice would you give somebody about how they craft their offer and how they package their offer? Right? Is it just Google search? Do they throw in some retargeting? Like, what advice would you give in terms of packaging?
If you'd have asked me a year ago, I would have said, start simple with search because it works. And it's really easy to track, and we get great results on it. Fast forward to now, I would say where possible, don't just sell search. The reason being, the buyer's journey has evolved dramatically and continues to evolve far more rapidly than probably any point in history. The way mobile has taken over, the way algorithms are increasingly affecting all our lives, the way we use our mobiles where we're in the restaurant, the restroom, a passenger seat of a car, means that you cannot just run a search campaign today. Or at least you can, and some people do, but it's significantly better if you don't. Couple it with retargeting, which, just to explain the language for anybody who hasn't heard it, retargeting is showing ads to people who visited your website after they have left on other platforms. So you're showing ads on other websites, or perhaps on YouTube or on Gmail or on Facebook or Instagram after they've been to your website. We've all had that happen to us. Just go on Amazon today if you haven't and look at something unusual. It will follow you around the internet for the next few weeks. That's retargeting in action. You can't rely on the one and done approach anymore. You might have got that person who clicked your ad while they were waiting for a bus, waiting for a train, in a moment, filling time while something was on their mind. And by the time they then hit their desktop or their iPad or whatever to actually follow through properly, you're distant memory. You have to be now retargeting them to be there in those moments where they're actually giving proper consideration to a thought process they started earlier on. And so we now find that wherever possible, our go-to is a combination of both. And you can sell them either way around, actually. You can lead with the retargeting, you can lead with PPC. You can do it either way, but put them together and you've got a hugely powerful combination.
And then in your point of view, Rob, what kind of markup should an agency be looking for? Kind of minimum, maximum, just kind of any raw thoughts? And I know that, like, don't sugarcoat this. I know for you and I, our opinions differ a little bit on the subject. So, just from your gut reaction, like, what do you believe in that regards?
So let's say somebody was coming to us. Our starting price is $295 a month. Okay, that's what we start at. Well, forget currencies. Let's just keep it simple. It's $295 a month roughly. If you're a brand new agency, I know people selling that at $500 a month, so they're making 40%. I wouldn't recommend that. It's too tight. That gives you very little money to service that client. Think of that 40% has to do two jobs. It has to pay you in terms of profit, and it has to pay the service costs of you maintaining that relationship. And $200 ain't going to do it, in my opinion. So you need to be pushing 600, 700 and upwards. And once you're into those kind of numbers, I always relate it to the kind of supply client that you're working with, though. I think you and I have had this conversation. We do agree. You can charge a lawyer more than a florist. Fundamentally, the service may be similar in terms of delivery, but the value to the end user is different. And ultimately, the end user is going to make a decision as to whether they keep or kill your services.
Yep.
So it has to be related to their value. So that $300 we charge may well turn to a $1,000 invoice for a lawyer. It may well turn into a $600 invoice for a florist. I think the most extreme one I have is I know one of our agency partners who marks us up by 80%. So we are 20% of his price point and has no problem because of the markets he sells into and the service he provides.
And obviously it's different too. If you have like a supply chain of leads coming to you, so to speak, right? Like you're going to have fundamentally like a different type of business set up. Even if let's say selling one to many in the florist niche, that might be fun for you. And you're taking less of a cut, but you're dealing with volume and you set expectations with the client in terms of how often you're going to talk and everything. Yes. But you might have, you might not, right? Like if you don't have those relationships and you're selling one-on-one, you got to take into consideration, like you said, your but then also, or your commission for selling the deal, or somebody in your teams, and then actually maintaining that relationship as well. That markup has to be there. And so if you have to choose to go after the florist or the lawyer, I surely hope that you would choose to go after the lawyer just fundamentally because you have the opportunity to make a whole lot more revenue, right? Without any other factors, like let's pick a niche where we can do the best in, right? Let's pick a niche where we can make $750 a month markup on each client or more versus, $250.
Yeah, and I think, and I would completely agree with every word of that. It makes perfect sense. There's one more criteria I actually always look at when I'm picking a niche, and it's a really basic one. Do I like these people? Fundamentally, depending on your communication style and your personality, you may find having conversations with lawyers all day long the best, most rewarding way to spend your day, or your worst nightmare. So, you can't. There are exceptions to every rule, but generally a lawyer is going to be a relatively combative, aggressive type of individual. A therapist, probably not so much, but there's always an exception. If you know that, choose to spend time talking to people you actually like talking to, whose businesses you understand and you want to help. Because it's much better feeling great that you've got somebody extra business and you've added value to their life if you actually like them. So I look for that a lot. I don't want to spend my days talking to people I don't like.
I think that's super important too. And it's funny because 5 years ago, a decade ago, I would have said like I don't care what niche I'm going after. Like it's just business. It's just the job at the end of the day. It's just it's a means to an end would have been kind of my answer to you. But when I think about it now, like that's kind of a shitty attitude to have about the situation. I'm like I don't. Like every day you're going to be interacting with these people, and if you don't like them, what's that say about every day of your existence? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
You're spending your days helping people that you don't like, and like banging your head against the wall. Like, it doesn't quite make sense to me anymore.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And that's not to say that it's the only factor. It isn't. I mean, we service clients in a huge range of different industries. And I could give you good examples and bad examples in each of them without a problem. What matters though is if you get to make a choice, and as an agency owner you do get to make a choice, make one that makes you feel good. That can never override the financials. This is a business. This is not a charity, so it has to meet your financial goals first and foremost. But if you can do that while enjoying your day a little bit more, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. All right, so let's move on. I'm cognizant of time. We're almost at the top of the hour already. This interview has just like flown by. So I'm like skipping through questions. All right, where do we go next? So if I've been like head down because I'm like not paying attention, it's because I'm like, oh crap, we're running out of time. So
I thought you were getting a reflection off my head.
Yeah, I
was
was
just dazzled.
What do you think from a conversion standpoint, Rob, and from like a prospecting standpoint? What are the main like sets of resources that an agency needs to have in their business to sell PPC? Like, obviously some type of go-to, I'm assuming proposal, an agreement, a contract. Like what are the kind of the main things that you would say? Like what are the resources, what are the assets? And then do we have any of those that maybe we could share with people?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things you need in place to sell PPC, because fundamentally people are going to come to you either who are new to advertising and have not advertised before. We have a tool that we can share quite happily, which allows you to calculate estimated outcomes based on Google data.
Yep.
Full disclosure, it isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Google publicly shared data isn't, but it's a heck of a lot closer than having nothing. And when we come back to setting expectations, first part of expectation is let's at least have a look what good might look like. And let's measure our performance against something to start with. Because if that estimate doesn't even look right to the client, then nothing you do ever after is ever going to look good.
100%.
So you have a tool for that. You need to be auditing accounts. So you'll need a document. And again, we can share a template for that of how we audit accounts and the kind of things we're looking for. Headlines on that, things that people hate, wasting money and losing business to competitors. If you can highlight either of those things in a proposal, you're on a good starting point. And the third thing is they need a means of getting paid. The way we do it is we combine our proposal documents into signable documents on the final page. Therefore, when you're talking to somebody through it, they can read it, they can understand it, and they can sign it at the same time.
Yep.
That removes one further point of friction in the process. So those three things we find are hugely valuable.
Okay.
I'd just add though, some people don't buy that way. If you present a bunch of numbers to somebody who is an emotional, ego-driven buyer, you'll turn them off, not on.
Yep.
So know your prospect. Be aware that in some places, your sole mission in making that sale is to demonstrate to that business owner how he can outrank and how he can beat the guy down the road who he doesn't think is very good. That's the sale process. So take the tools, use them in the right environments at the right time.
Cool. So we can definitely link to that in the show notes, Rob. Could you take a second, maybe again, just in the spirit of wrapping things up, trying to figure out anything big that we missed? Can you maybe explain the Smart Niche program, what that is, kind of our mission and our values there, why we offer that, and how that kind of sets us apart and every one of our prospects and customers do?
Yeah, so Smart Niche for us arose out of two things. One is we want to be able to offer the best services we can. We have a ton of experience that, and I mean this with no disrespect to anybody, 99% of agencies will never see the breadth and volume of clients that we have coming through the door at Invisible PPC. So our industry and sector knowledge is pretty much up there in terms of what we're used to seeing compared to most agencies will ever experience. That gives us context. We know what good looks like. And so what we wanted to do with Smart Niche was document and package good so that as an agency owner, you can sell with confidence because we've got niches and there's on our current list, there's best part of 100 of them where we have got proven landing pages, proven offers, proven built out campaigns that you can claim as your own, customize to the client and sell. Now that takes, it's like starting the 100-meter race on the 60-meter line. You've got a pretty damn good chance of beating everybody else in that because all the work to get to that stage, all the testing, all the proving that other agencies have to go through is done. We know what the answer is. And it's not just been proven once, it's been proven in multiple markets with multiple clients different shapes, sizes, locations. So we know the answer is the right answer. That for us means that it's for an agency owner, you can have a high degree of confidence because they're backed up by case studies, they're backed up by documentation.
Yep.
It means they're fast to implement because our implementation process is super clean for them. We've done implementations and go lives in like 72 hours. That's not the norm, and that relies on everything being in play and delivered diligently, but you can. And so that's why we did Smart Niche. I guess the other thing is as well, what we wanted to recognize is that sometimes we lose clients that we shouldn't lose because the campaign's doing great.
Yep.
And we had this kind of burning desire in the business not to lose the value of all that knowledge and saying, look, just because the client didn't turn out in this instance doesn't make this any less valuable. Let's share this so that other agencies can get the value and the benefit from it. So you effectively can leverage it to be a scalable niche agency without having to learn the niche at the back end.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. One of the biggest data plays I think that you could possibly provide for yourself at Invisible, a huge win, obviously, but then for everybody working with you, I mean, the win that brings them is absolutely incredible. So
we're always looking for more to add to it, by the way. We're always looking for more to put. So we've got a list where we're 90% certain that it's going to be good, and that's a Smart Niche list. We also have a beta list behind that of, we're 70% confident. We just need a couple more accounts to test this and just absolutely prove it. So we're always looking for those extras where we can really broaden that.
And then there's a little bit of a training program, so to speak, in terms of like best practices and kind of getting your foot off the ground with the Smart Niche program. Can you talk about that real quick, and then we'll wrap this up?
I can. So the Smart Niche program, actually, we produce for free. It gives you everything you need to know about selling PPC to these niche customers. It will tell you what your FAQs for go live, before go live, onboarding. It will show you how to set expectations. It will show you a 6-month roadmap. It will show you how to handle common client questions. It will show you expected cost per lead and minimum budget recommendations in every single market there's a Smart Niche for. So in that niche, I need a minimum budget of $1,000. My leads are going to come in at $30 each. I should tell my client A, B, and C. I'm good to go. So it really is. And for most, it's one of the things I'm most proud of we've produced here. And I can't take the credit for it because the team did 90% of the work for it and did an amazing job. It's not salesy. It's there to educate. And you can get, if you watched every video end to end, it's about 55 minutes worth of training. It's not a major commitment, but it's huge value. And it will set you on a really good path as to being a very high quality, responsible, skilled agency.
100%. And guys and gals listening, I hope that you see the value in this. When Rob first told me about this program, like my jaw just dropped, right? Like most of the hard work is out of the equation. What is the cost per lead? What's the cost per click? What should we see in terms of conversions? What type of volume is there? What offers are working best? What landing pages are working best? Like all those KPIs that you need as an agency to really be able to crush it for a local business, right? Or any of the niches or verticals in the Smart Niche program, like it's there. And just know that I'm constantly pushing on Rob, like we got to monetize this better because this data is ridiculous and nobody has this stuff. And so understand that Rob is correct. He did tell you guys that the program is free right now at some level. I'm telling you guys, that's going to change. So if you're watching this 6 months after this is recorded, or even a month after this is recorded, know that that's probably not going to stick around because Rob's being a little too kind and a little too forthcoming with some of this data.
I saw your reaction when I said that, and you know what? I agree. I think it is hugely valuable. There's 6 years worth of learning and a team of 25 people that have produced that. That didn't happen by accident. That's a lot of knowledge and a lot of clients and a lot of, as Joe said at the start, we spend $2.5 million a month for our clients. That's a lot of test data that most agencies will never see. And so, absolutely right. We will find ways to add even more value, and that situation may change.
100%. So last question to wrap this thing up, Rob. Every podcast out there, I feel like, asks, like, what are your recommended 3 books, right? So on our podcast, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to ask you, what's the one book that's made the biggest impact on Invisible PPC? When you look at like the structural, like the actual changes and impact that were made, not like you read through the book and you're like, yeah, this was good, right? And then it was like, yeah, someday, I'll make some implementations from this. Like, what book made the biggest impact?
I'm going to give you a book that is probably not on your list. And it's probably not on your list because it's not a business book. But to me, the lessons are super transferable. For those who know me, I'm a bit of a space nerd. I like most things space related. There's a book by a former space shuttle commander by the name of Chris Hadfield. It's called An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. And it's his story of how a Canadian became an astronaut. Bearing in mind that Canada has no space program and no astronauts previously. That was a pretty hard ask when at 5 years old you decide to become an astronaut. There is no clear path for you to follow. And yet not only did he fly space shuttle twice, he also flew the Soyuz.
Yeah.
And had incredible experiences along the way. And one of the key lessons in it, which I'll just share very briefly because I know we're short of time, Joe, is simply this. A whole generation of astronauts, when you think you get to be an astronaut, you think, that's it, I'm going to go to space. Most astronauts don't go to space. A whole generation of astronauts who grew up with a shuttle program couldn't go to space when the shuttle retired and the Soyuz, the Russian craft, took over for one reason. It was smaller. Tall astronauts could no longer fly. So imagine you've trained for 20 years and suddenly you're 3 inches too small for the new craft, too tall for the new craft. Can you imagine how that feels? The message he brings to that is you have to learn to love the process. The outcomes themselves, your goals that you set, are really important. But if you can get your kick from the process you put yourself through every day to move forward in your business or in your personal life, that process is far more valuable than that momentary success. Because that fades fast, that goes away. Enjoying the process doesn't. And so it's a brilliant book, and that's just one little snippet out there that I find personally very valuable.
I love that. Yeah, I'll definitely be picking up that book and reading it. All too often in life, like we just speed through day to day, right? And we're not living in the moment and enjoying the path and enjoying, the route, so to speak, there. So definitely, I'm sure a lesson that we can all be reminded with, and definitely I need to be reminded with. Always got those goals and aspirations and pushing them for them, but we got to remember to live in the moment. So. All right, fantastic. So guys, I really enjoyed having Rob on and kind of letting you guys peek behind the scenes of Invisible PPC, letting you guys get to know Rob better. And Rob, man, thanks so much for joining us for today.
Absolute pleasure.
I got a ton of questions still that we didn't even get to dive into. We didn't get to talk about Omni. We didn't get to talk about a whole lot of stuff. I was going to talk about client onboarding and retention and converting clients a bunch more. So we'll have to see how this goes. If this podcast blows it up, maybe we'll just have you come back on and we'll do another deep dive.
Sounds like fun to me. I'm always in for that.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to rate, review, and give us some love here on iTunes and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Joe Troyer signing out.
Now, before you go, I have something extremely special for you. What if some of the top entrepreneurs of our entire industry went a little nuts and decided that they'd give away their best products for free? Well, forget the what if. This is actually happening, all right? These top entrepreneurs join me, and we are now running a contest to give you their best products absolutely free. And you don't want to miss out on this amazing opportunity. So go check it out at digitaltriggers.io/contest. And I want you guys to understand that yes, this is a contest, but there is quite literally something for everyone. So just by joining, you are a winner. So go check it out at digitaltriggers.io/contest. Again, that's digitaltriggers.io/contest. And guys, again, this is a limited time contest. So go ahead and do it now before it's too late. We'll see you on the next episode.